why does God create people with special needs, say low-functioning Down syndrome or autism, etc., so forth, if they are supposed to have a purpose to worship, work, and live for His glory, and they can't do that in the way that other people can?
Okay, well, first of all, what does Jesus say to the young man who was born blind?
Are you speaking in reference to how He says it is not his sin or his parents' sin, but rather that the glory of God may be manifested in him? Yeah.
I'll just use one example. It's not just people with special needs, but it's suffering in general.
Well, certainly.
Okay? The scriptures talk a lot about suffering, and the only human being, completely innocent human being that suffered the greatest, of course, was Jesus, and that suffering was for our ultimate good. In other words, suffering can bring forth good. But I just remember my grandmother, for example. My grandmother, the last 4 years of her life was bedridden. And people were asking, well, God, why don't you just take her? What kind of quality of life is this? And my aunt, who took care of her every day for 4 years, grew more in that 4 years than she did in her previous 44. I remember in 2020, the whole COVID year, my father was dying. And he had something called sundowners. You know what sundowners is? When the sun goes down, they kind of lose their personality. They kind of get very petrified, and they do erratic things. And my dad would get up in the middle of the night and wander the house. And I remember laying on the floor next to him, and he would try and get out of bed, and I would just put my hand up and say, Dad, you got to stay in bed. And then I'd have to do certain things for him that he'd look at me and he'd say, nobody should have to do this for me. And I said, Dad, you're actually helping me. Because by me having to serve you, you're helping me. Because if life was just all about me and what I wanted, I'm not going to become more like Jesus. If I'm forced to take care of somebody else, even though I might not want to do it. I do want to do it, but I don't. Can we just be honest? I didn't want to lay there all night going, Dad, no. Dad, no. Didn't want to do it. But I grew through going through that. By the way, there's Richard Dawkins and others, atheists, have talked about we should eradicate Down syndrome. In the womb. You find out a baby's down, you abort him, right? You want to, and I think Iceland is bragging about that. We've pretty much eradicated Down syndrome. Does anyone in here know a Down syndrome person? Do you know who's abnormal? We are, not them. They're the most loving people I've ever met. They're special needs. No, we're special needs. We're brats, right? We're shallow. We're selfish. We need difficulty in this life. It's a fallen world, but we need it, and the scriptures talk about it. Paul talks about it building character. James says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Does anyone here count it joy when you're trying to hold your dad up all night? I don't.
I loved your answer. Thank you